Welcome back, MTG Joe here. Today we are going to look at the weekly metagame breakdown for the standard best 3 format, traditional standard. We're going to look at the top performing decks on the ladder from Diamond and Mythic rank. We're going to look at Untapped for our data source. Some folks have asked about the off-meta decks. I will spend some time this weekend, pull together whatever kind of decks I could find. It's a little harder this kind of go around. A lot of the decks are homogenized at this point towards the top. But I'll spend some time looking at it after the qualifier weekend, something I've been practicing for myself. But let's look at the data. We have popularity of the day, basically what's the most popular, and then we'll look at the win rates kind of correlated to them. I will paste and timestamp all these deck lists if you want to use Untapped. Link is in the video description as well, along with the deck lists themselves. So let's look at it. Izzet Prowess, top played deck, 20%. At the weekend's RC in the US, it was over 30%. It did have like a mid 50s, I believe, % win rate. But given the volume of decks being played, you're going to basically, every mirror match is a 50% win rate. One person wins, one loses. So it could artificially kind of push that down. But it is the big boogeyman of the format. You do need to be able to answer it, and it's something to kind of play around. What's interesting is we're seeing a rise again of mono black midrange. Mono black technically doesn't have a way to answer the Corey Steel Cutter, something like Temporary Lockdown, but it is seeing more play recently. So we'll take a look at what those decks look like. Jeskai Oculus at 8%, Dimir Midrange at about 5%, Omni Combo at about 5%, Domain is 4%. Honestly, I went down to 50% win rates, and not a single list at least 35 games played with Domain popped up. Pretty much stock list, nothing's changed, so you won't see it in this video, but if you want to play Domain, it's there. Hangs around. Mono Red, seen a big drop. A lot of people have picked up Prowess instead of it. Its win rate has come down quite a bit as well. Low 50s in terms of win rate for that. And then Boros Mice is actually on an uptick. Someone at the beginning of the season got #1 Mythic really quick with it. I don't have their name anymore, but we'll look at a list there. A little bit different kind of build of the Mice deck there. But yeah, like we see, Izzet Prowess, kind of big increase, and then a stark decrease even on the Oculus side, 17% down to about 8%. And we see kind of the fall of Mono Red being upwards of 20+%, dropping down to 3% in terms of play rate. We're going to look at 15,000 games today. Diamond and Mythic rank, May 1st through to the 8th, first week of May. Ladder reset, folks are grinding. Mono black midrange, demons kind of hybrid at 75%. So we still have an Unholy Annex, but we're seeing some new cards in the deck. These decks will play 1 to 2 speed demons typically. It's a demon, it's speedy. 5 mana, 5/5, flying trample, start your engines. Since you have the start the engines theme, you'll notice a couple of Amonkhet Raceways in the mana base. Haste out some of your threats. Hasty Archfiend, Hasty Speed Demon. And this is kind of another card draw engine, plays nicely with Sheoldred. We're also seeing some copies of Karsi Revenant, Vampire Nighthawk, all grown up. Vampire Nighthawk was, I think, every player's first card where you're like, this is the most broken card ever. I remember playing Dimir as my first starter deck and just buying Nighthawks to play in there. But Flying Death Touch, Lifelink, and then you can put those keywords onto another creature when you exile it from your graveyard. Plays again nicely with Speed Demon, Archfiend the Dross, stuff like that. So you have kind of that effect. Then the usual Oops All removal package, Maze Mind's Tome for some card advantage as well. You have the Soulstone Sanctuary that plays with the Unholy Annex, and then Gix Command as a sweeper. The Preacher is actually pretty good into the Izzet decks. A lot of times, like even playing, like I've been playing a lot of Alchemy for the qualifier, and Preacher stonewalls the deck pretty hard, just 4 toughness, when a lot of your removals 2 to 4 damage, 2 to 3 damage. Sideboard, you got the End, nice way to kind of hit key pieces of like combo decks or stuff like that. Liliana is for the grinder matchups, control matchups, stuff like that. Stonebrain, Omniscience decks, kind of key combo pieces. Filigree Silex is a way that you can deal with permanents. So it's a way to hit 1 and 2 mana out of like, say, Talents, Steel Cutters, whatever it may be. Grindier matchups, you have more tomes. Cruel Claw Heist as a discard effect. Anoint, cheap removal, Ghost Vacuum for graveyard hate, Duress for cheap hand hate, and then Dreams of Steel of Oil. Strong because it hits artifacts in addition to creatures, so it's a way to pick off Quarry Steel Cutters. We then go to Boros Mice, 74%, 58 games played, and some interesting inclusions in this. So obviously it's your mouse package, right? Manifold Mouse, Heartfire Hero, Emberheart Challenger. The mice are there. It's kind of the Auras theme version, so Sheltered by Ghosts, Shard Mage, Optimistic Scavenger, Crumb and Get It, Unknown Words. Creature gets +2/2, and then if the gift was promised, that creature gains indestructible till end of turn. You basically give your opponent the food, but it's another protection effect in one. And then you have Spellbook Vendor, a way that every turn you could effectively trigger Valiant. It puts a roll token, which triggers Eerie, and then it also puts Sorcerer Roll, which gives, I actually forget, I don't think I've ever, another roll would be put on this. Whenever this creature attacks, you scry 1. So boost and scry, but 1 mana you get to put rolls and kind of get that value. Now notably rolls can't stack on the same one, but at least it triggers Valiant every time. And then you have some Lightning Helix as the only removal in the deck outside of the Sheltered by Ghosts. Mana base does improve in this deck since we got the Verges. Your sideboard against discard decks, you have Baloth, Sunspine Links for the greedy mana base, Graveyard Hate for like Omni graveyard decks, Pyroclasm for, actually pretty good against Prowess, any kind of the mirrors, stuff like that. Your creatures grow, so you can outscale it. Helix for the aggressive mirrors, Get Lost, Catch-All removal, Torch for the aggressive decks, Litho Barrage for like Oculus style decks, and then Graveyard Hate with Ghost Vacuum. So in case where you just got to pick off like one card versus deal with their whole graveyard. Prowess. So this deck here, a lot of the decks have adopted, this one's at 69%, have adopted some number of Drake Catchers. So this card is really good in the mirror. It lets you go offense, defense. It puts pressure on your opponent, plays really nicely with Monstrous Rage, and then making tokens. It plays well because the tokens could block the Slick Shot Show Off pretty well outside of a Monstrous Rage. And the core of the deck is just chaining together 2 spells each turn. This works on both players' turns, so you have the Steel Cutter that can then start making you tokens, and you kind of go to town. Seeing 4 stock ups, some play Hearth Elemental. A lot of them have dropped Bolt Wave to just be more interactive. Big card in these decks is Into the Floodmaw. While it's flexible to hit all permanents, it can deal with temporary lockdown out of your opponent, or High Noon, or any of the hate pieces that your opponent might throw at you. Then we have in the sideboard, Ghost Vacuum for Graveyard Hate, the 4th copy of Floodmaw. Again, opponents bringing in Lockdown. It's a big card to hit. Spell Pierce is cheap disruption. Torch as cheap removal. Drake Catcher is another reasonable card if your opponent's playing like split ups. You could go offense, defense, like with Vigilance and the mirrors. Slick Shot can be a little slow, so if they have like Authority of the Consoles, loses some of its gusto. If it's a deck that's showing like a lot of torches or cheap removal, this can at least outgrow damage-based removal. Pyroclasm, again, for the mirrors, Mice mat decks, stuff like that. Ral for the grindier matchups, Sunspine Links for the greedy mana bases, and it's Oculus, stuff like that. You might want Litho Barrage as well as consideration. Golgari Midrange, a deck I didn't think we'd be seeing today. So Apper named Golgarbage at times because it can win games, but at times it's just getting outpaced value-wise by a lot of decks, tempo decks, bounce decks, stuff like that. Interesting card seeing here is Scavenger Regent. So for 2 mana X, basically kind of like a pseudo Meathook Massacre stapled to a permanent, so you can get that back over and over. We're seeing Harvester of Misery, so just more ways to deal with go wide boards in an aggressive meta. This works out pretty nice. You have Gix Command as a sweeper, Baloth main. There's a lot of chunkers, preachers, sentinels. Still seeing a Glissa. Glissa's largely fallen out of favor with a nowhere to run meta. But then you have your Llanowar into all the 3s. Tear main, Tranquil Throwback main, Waste Steel Cutter, and then just a whole bunch of removal scattered into the deck. Sideboard in the grindier matchups, you have Unholy Annex, Vivian Reed, nice against Control, Enchantment or Artifact heavy decks, big flyers, Baloth for the discard decks, Archfiend in like the grindier matchup, or not even the grindier, Like some of the aggressive decks, this is just a big stone wall, plays out nicely with the Unholy Annex, so you could just become like a pseudo demons deck. You don't want to play this against Dimir or anything like with stun counters. It's more of a liability. Terra Sunder, Heritage, I was going to say Heretic, Reclamation, Artifact Enchantment, and Exile Graveyards. Paw Patch formation kind of akin. Naturally, I spent $5 each on Paw Patch formations. They reprint a functional reprint at common. That's like 10 cents. Outrageous Robbery, domain matchups, Grandier matchups, mid-range matchups, kind of your mirror breaker for card advantage, and then Graveyard Hate with Ghost Vacuum. Dimir Midrange, 66%. So this one's bracing a little bit more on the flash elements. We're seeing a couple copies of Malcolm. But core of this deck, bunch of cheap evasive creatures, playing at instant speed as much as possible. You play Kaido, that cheats it out through ninjutsu with all these evasive creatures. All the evasive creatures also draw you a bunch of cards, often during Curiosity. Preacher is kind of the big chunker to gum up the board. And then you have, just again, whole whack of removal. Annoyance, you have Go for the Throats. Blood Pit's Drowner kind of taps down your opponent's big things, give you some value. And then Spell Pierce is cheap disruption. In your sideboard, Shieldred for the aggressive decks, kind of mid-rangey decks. Strategic Betrayal is a really sweet card. 2 mana, opponent exiles a creature they control, and then exiles the graveyard as well. So good against, like, more all decks than necessarily wide decks, but also has the clause of hitting the graveyards. Cheap counters and negate. Go for the Throat, Annoyance, cheap removal. Get Out is a pretty interesting one because it hits enchantments or creatures. Against the Pixie decks, hits pretty much everything in their deck other than Kaido, so cool one there. Spell Pierce is cheap disruption. Phantom Interference, again, just another cheap counter. Ghost Vacuum, Graveyard Hate, Duress for Hand Hate. We go to Azorius Artifacts, putting up a pretty good show, 63%. So United Battlefront is kind of your collected company for non-creatures. Also, Kyla's Reconstruction also hits artifacts. I know it always gets played with creatures, but gives you another angle there. And what you're trying to do is just load your deck up on artifacts, specifically for Simulacrum Synthesizer comes into play, scries 2, and then whenever an artifact 3 CMC or more enters, you get to create a construct, make a bunch of big tokens. Repurposing Bay helps you birthing pod your cheaper stuff into more copies of Synth. Basically, just try to get as many of these out. You make a whole bunch of big creatures and go to town. Braided Net taps things down. Earliest Snares removal. Cryptic Coat is kind of evasion. Thousand Moods Smithy is enters. You create a token. So another way to make more tokens. Playfire Bricks helps you ramp, and then is fodder for the Purposing Bay removal. More ramp, and then some incidental Graveyard Hate and Candy Trail sort out your early game. Your sideboard, you have Lockdown for the Corey decks, aggressive decks, Graveyard Hate, negates for cheap counters against Omni combo, or against Prowess, you have High Noon. Honestly, even against sometimes the Pixie decks, like I've been doing this in Alchemy, like it's been reasonable there too. Against, there's like a black-white Pixie version there, and when I was on testing out Jeskai Control with High Noon, and it just slows them down. If they can only play one creature per turn, they can't do Pixie loops and stuff like that. Loss, cheap removal, exercise, just flexible artifact enchantment, big things, then Disdainful Stroke for the big mana spells. Oculus, 63%. So this deck is looking to draw, discard, fill your graveyard, and then use things like Helping Hand to bring back your Enhorrid Oculus. Prophecy-Datic Memory also benefits you from drawing cards, or you get to stack counters on various creatures. So things like Steamcore Scholar self-enables the draw, and then Flying Vigilance make a really big body. You get value at a Tursa that lets you cast stuff in the graveyard. Dragon Hunt is looting, that is also removal. Extra combats with Fear missing out, and just a whole bunch of cheap kind of interaction in the deck. Sideboard, when your opponent's on heavy Graveyard Hate, you have Chandra Spark Hunter. Lauren as Artifact Enchantment Hate, sheltered for the aggressive decks. Cheap counters, no more lies, negates. Disdainful Stroke for the bigger mana the decks. For counter spells, High Noon for kind of storm decks like we mentioned, Exercise as flexible removal, Destroy Evil for enchantment hate, big things, and then Ghost Vacuum for graveyard hate. Azorius Omni combo, so this is the updated version of the combo. This one's at 60%. What this deck is looking to do is draw, discard, put Omniscience into your graveyard, you bring it back with Abuela's Awakening, and then you just chain through your deck. The win condition of this deck now is no longer using the invasion battles. Instead, you're basically looping 2 copies of Meringue River Regent, bouncing each other in addition to Founding of the Third Path to do Chapter 2, and then you eventually just mill out your opponent. Each time River Regent comes to play, you get to bounce Rolling Dragonstorm that helps you dig further into the combo. 4 lockdown main, 4 stock ups, just help you dig further into the combo. Mistrise Village lets your combo become a counterball. You do have the option to kind of play a more mid-rangey deck. Things like Voice of Victory helps against instant speed interaction. You can go more like just a blue-white control deck with Overlord of the Mistmoors, Beza, so you kind of change your game plan away from the graveyard combo. Activated abilities of artifacts, creatures, planeswalkers can't be activated, so when it's relevant, you have the Clarion. Cheap counters, cheap removal, kind of mixed in there depending on how you want to disrupt. Gruul Delirium. So this deck here, I played a version of this at the RCQ a while back. Got some new cards in Tursa, helps enable the combo. 1 copy of Baldur's Trade Worm in the graveyard. This one's at 58%. But you're trying to establish Delirium, just basically one of 4 different types. You have cards like Patchwork Beastie that counts as types. And then Violent Urge is basically double strike with the deck. Wildfire Wickerfolk, another hasty threat that gets bigger. Trample, extra combats. Keen Eye Curator can get bigger. Breakout hastes out any of your 1 or 2 drops as well. Overprotect as a protection effect that also gives a power boost. Pyroclasm, most of your stuff's like 3 toughness in this deck, so good in the aggressive decks. You have Sunspine Links for the greedy mana base. When they have Graveyard Hate, you can bring in Chandra. Sharpshooter deals with some common hate pieces. More sweepers, just more flexible removal options. Heritage Reclamation, pick your poison. So you just kind of bring these in as needed. Like if your opponent's on heavy artifacts or whatever it may be, you have these kind of effects. Against Oculus, you have the Barrages, Haywire Might, Artifact Enchantment Hate, Graveyard Hate, and then Convenient Truth. I don't know why you would have this in here. I'm going to be honest with you. Seems pretty bad, but I don't know. Let me know in the comments if you see a purpose of that one. We have Jeskai Control. So this deck ended up winning the RC this past weekend. Not doing that great, 54%. But 4 of Lockdown main. You have your Shiko package to buy back like stock ups. You have the Rolling Dragonstorm that lets you churn through your deck, but just kind of control deck. Blue-white basis with red for Shikos and Lightning Helix in the main. Sideboard, you have Zergos, just another kind of haste threat, goes around sweepers, gives you some card advantage. Against discard decks, you have the Bailots. Tishana's Tidebinder for activated abilities, Conceals Flanker, Proactive Approach deal with graveyards. You have Pyroclasm for the aggressive decks, just a sweeper on 2. Cheap counters, we've mentioned Exercise, Lethal Barrage, and then against hasty decks, you also have consoles. Then have Orzhov Pixie, 53%. So this is your lockdown as an aggressive threat. So dealing with your opponent's creatures, but you also stack it with a bunch of ETB effects, Hopeless Nightmares, Momentum Breakers, Nowhere to Run. And then you're going to pick up your lockdown with Sun Pearl Kirin or Nurturing Pixie. Take care of all these ETBs again, so you get that more value. Strip your opponent's hands, force to sacrifice their board, and then you put them all under lockdown again, and you loop that. Creatures for kind of grind value, Bezas, a couple Holy Annex on top end. The grindier matchups, you have more Unholy Annex. For opponents' discard decks, you have Wiltleaf Liege, comes into play for free, kind of similar to the Bailoth. You have Lauren, Artifact Enchantment Hate, Graveyard Hate, kind of flexibility with Conceals Flanker, Rest in Peace, cheap removal and Get Lost, and then a bunch of discard as relevant matchup. And then lastly, how far mono red has fallen, 51%. So this basically stock mono red. We see 3 Soulstone instead of 2. We see pretty much the Sunspine Links package. So nothing's really changed too much with mono red. Just want to show it to include, because folks would be asking if I didn't include it, whereas I have it in mono red. It's at 51%. Is what it is. So that is it. Let me know what you've been playing, what you've been liking, and we'll catch you next time. Thanks for watching.